All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Let me just load in the presentation. There we go. All right, perfect. So I will be talking tonight about scaling blockchain, a trilemma. I want to start off with this little GIF over here. I'm not sure if everyone remembers this. Back in the day, like 1995, even 2000, you want to load a picture on the internet, and it's just kind of like, do I have to refresh? It's not there yet? What's happening, right? So this is kind of where blockchain is at today. It's struggling sometimes, it's not very smooth yet, and then, you hear these kind of statements where people say, oh, Bitcoin is slow, it's expensive. There's so many other solutions that are way more inexpensive and faster. Or people talk about Ethereum, where Web 3.0 is going to come. It's going to combine all these different applications and projects. But it can't even handle CryptoKitties. It's just like digital, cartoony cats, and it can't even handle that. So how do you expect it to handle the rest, right? And then, of course, you've got always this friend that comes up to you and he's like, yeah, I heard about this new project. It does like 100,000 transactions per second, no transaction fees. It's amazing. Check it out. Here's my referral code, whatever. So this stuff we hear every day, right? But in order to have this, we're going to need different pillars. Actually, 3 very specific pillars are needed in order to scale blockchain. The first one is decentralization. We've got scalability and we've got security. But the Japanese have a saying which is tukakukan, which means equivalent exchange. Nothing comes for free. So today we have to pick 2 out of those 3. We cannot have all 3 of them yet because we're not as advanced yet as we would like it to be, and so I'm going to deep dive a little bit further into all of these 3 pillars. First one being decentralization. So the first one on your left, you can see projects that are decentralized. Bitcoin, for instance, it's got about 10,000 nodes, so it's pretty spread out all over the world. They have a focus on financial transactions, and then of course Ripple or XRP comes to mind. And they have only 20 nodes, out of which 5 are owned by Ripple Labs themselves. And why is that Bitcoin is very decentralized and Ripple is centralized? Well, it's because Ripple has a way higher transaction per second rate. That's what we're going to see in the next slide as well about scalability. But so Ripple is already sacrificing the decentralization aspect of those 3 pillars, right? When we then take a look at Ethereum, they have almost 33,000 nodes. So that's a lot when it comes to decentralization. And Neo only has 4, which are all owned by the Neo Foundation. So again, decentralization and centralization are very difficult. This is probably the most difficult pillar. So when we look at scalability, like I said, Ripple, they have way more transactions per second, even like 1,500, which is a very important requirement when it comes to financial transactions. When you think about Visa, credit card transactions, etc., they need a lot of transactions per second, right? And then Bitcoin only has a maximum of like 15 when it's small transactions. A lot more complex transactions, it goes down to about 3, which is very poor. Now, what we see also is that a lot of new projects that come into space start off with a centralized model. The first one that comes to mind is, for instance, IOTA. And the reason why they start off centralized is because since the technology is so new, they first want to test it out in a controlled environment. If they immediately start accepting just anyone, your average Joe, to contribute to the network, it might get harder for them to actually achieve and develop what they're looking for. So they usually start off centralized, and as the product grows and the community grows, more members get to contribute and participate in the network. Now, these days, this often comes at a high price. If we look at NEO, the minimum price to have a node is above $20,000. And keeping this in mind as well is this very interesting website called Are We Decentralized Yet?, which has been developed by one of the founders of Dogecoin. And if we look here, we'll be able to see that, for instance, miners and voters that host a NEO node are actually not incentivized. So let's say tomorrow you decide to set up a NEO miner and you want to contribute to the network. You're investing more than $20,000, but you're actually not getting anything in return. This begs the question that when you see no transaction fees, free transactions, whatever, then you're going to have to think about, okay, but how are we going to reward and contribute people from participating in the network, right? So how are we going to decentralize our network? So here, some of the technologies choose to sacrifice the decentralization aspect in order to have better scalability. The third pillar is security, which the king of security is always private permission networks. The first one that comes to mind is Hyperledger Fabric, for instance. Now, why are they the best in security? It's because they get to dictate and decide who comes inside their network. They can say, oh, I want this party to become a node and participate in the network. So automatically, if they can say that this party can participate in the network, they can also put restrictions like, oh, you need to have this performance system, it needs to have this minimum specification, etc., etc. So automatically, you're going to have a network that has a very high quality of resources. And so your transactions are going to go up. So your scalability is improved. You're going to have less attack points for malicious nodes that are going to try and infiltrate your network because it's closed, right? I mean, if you look at Ethereum that has almost 33,000 nodes, how are you going to control and try and secure your network when every day X amount of new people come in, right? So again, here, they have very good security, they have very good scalability, but they're sacrificing decentralization. And this is very, like I said, decentralization is the most difficult pillar of blockchain technology, but remains one of the most important as well. And so in order to achieve the goal, for scalability, we're going to have to find new solutions. Less than 48 hours ago, Bitcoin Cash forked and increased the block size, doubled it, etc. They see that as a potential solution. When we look at Ethereum, they're investing heavily into Plasma and Casper. These might be terms that you've heard in the past. And they're also working with sharding. The idea is that you have the main chain that always is online, right? And then some nodes are going to do transactions off the chain where they're going to be conducting business together. And there's going to be an extra verifying party who is going to verify this transaction before it gets uploaded back onto the main chain. So these are quite complex subjects, but at the end of my presentation, you'll see also the people that I mentioned in the credits, and if you're interested, definitely check them out. When it comes to security, the consensus is very important. These days, we don't have a perfect consensus yet. We have some that favor security with advanced algorithms, but then tend to sacrifice scalability because they're a little slower. And then we have other consensus algorithms that are faster, but then don't incentivize people from contributing to the network because you don't get any rewards. So there's still a lot of work to do with that. And then last but not least, decentralization. Perhaps a compromise between public and private is going to be the solution. At Trace, we've already come up with a solution for some of our customers where we try to put parts of the business logic on the blockchain, and then we keep a separate database with sensitive data off the chain. So we're kind of making a combination of both of them. So perhaps this will be the way to go in order to take off. But right now, the way we are, the technology just isn't there yet. And in order to get to the point where we're going to have massive adoption, we're going to have to be a little bit more patient. So thank you everyone for listening to my presentation.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Because of our tight schedule, I only have one question for you. Will a fully decentralized blockchain world ever be possible or practical?
Well, to answer your question, I think these days, since Bitcoin back in the day was using a case in financial environments, I think with the technology we have today, maybe the financial case is not the best one. But when we look at other initiatives like the city of Dubai that wants to become fully decentralized with blockchain technology, they want to make sure that the visa process and a lot of the administrative paperwork becomes blockchain oriented, where maybe transaction speed is less important, then we can already have a more interesting case. So I think there might be cases that we have to still identify which are more appropriate for today's case. Again, if we look at Netflix that was mentioned during Tom's presentation, if we go back to my GIF 1995, year 2000, and Netflix came up to you guys tonight with a pitch and the idea, look, I want to have 1080p, 4K video streaming on demand, etc. You guys would be sitting there as well like, how is this possible? I mean, you can't even load a picture completely yet, right? So I think we really have to think and adapt the case to the technology we have today. And to answer your second question, is it practical? Well, my colleagues that are going to discuss Neoblog are going to talk a lot more about practicality when it comes to using and implementing big blockchain technology. But at Trace also we try to not only work with the technology, but we also try to make people think in a decentralized way, which is very new for a lot of decision makers in companies. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you.